Welcome to the 2022 Kentucky Bourbon Festival and the first edition of the Bourbon 30 Talk Show. This is sponsored by Great Western Malting. You know that's a hot mic, don't you?
We do
It's
now.
we're talking about Denny's haircut.
It's a hot mic. Yeah.
That's why I'm wearing a
Welcome
hat.
back to this afternoon edition of the Bourbon 30 Talk Show. I have some wonderful guests with me that I'll introduce in just a moment after we give a little pimpage to our sponsor, Great Western Malting. Can't get by without people like this supporting the festival, so you guys can come in and have such a great time. Thank God for that cloud over your head, right? It was getting a little warm. Not enough room under the shade, is it? I'm Steve Coombs. I'm the Director of Content and Programming for the festival. I'm a whiskey writer, which has allowed me to meet these two in my regular job of writing about the industry personalities. And I want to introduce two unemployed former master distillers, former master of maturation at Maker's Mark, living the life of leisure right now, right?
Yeah.
That's what they keep saying. I don't know that that's what it is.
Jane Bowie and Denny Potter. I'm sorry, I didn't
Hi.
even give their names.
Hi. Former.
I'm teasing them because I ran into him at Bardstown Bourbon Company's restaurant the other day and was like, wow, working hard. Living your best life.
Steve, it's called research.
Research. Absolutely. So I'm going to have a little fun with them about their departure, but literally these were some of the most notable Maker's Mark folks who have set out on their own to do a new project. We'll talk about that shortly. But how do you leave? Here's my first question. How easy is it or how hard is it to leave Maker's Mark?
It was one of the biggest heartbreaks of my life. I had been there 16 years.
And you're not a sentimental sort.
I'm not. You don't know me, but I am not warm and fuzzy.
Ice Queen is kind of...
Ice Queen.
Yeah.
I get shit done. But I was Rob Samuel's first hire when he came to join his dad at Maker's Mark. And he and I were the global department. So I had been with them my entire career. I was 25 years old when they hired me. And he still calls every day. So it was bittersweet.
It's a pretty good boss to employee relationship, I would say.
We were very close. And you're never shedding that Maker's skin. It's a wonderful brand. It's a wonderful place to work, wonderful people. So it was really about chasing a dream and trying out on our own because we were inspired by the stories we told of Bill and Margie Samuels every day. So it was bittersweet. It feels weird, but what a great education.
And this was the end of your second tour of duty there, right?
It was. Yeah, I mean, it professionally was probably the toughest decision I've ever made. I mean, you know, I've been in the industry for 25 years, and I've only worked for two companies during that time, but did, you know, an initial stint at Makers, got asked to do an assignment down in the Caribbean to run a rum distillery. And so when I had the opportunity to go back to Makers, you know, 4 years ago, you know, I took it. I thought I had the greatest job in the world at Heaven Hill as VP of Ops and Master Distiller, but then, you know, the thought of going back to Makers, and, you know, it was something we said even when I was there the first time, and it was our mantra, and still is at Makers, which is our worst day is better than everybody's best day. That is Maker's Mark in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Like, when you can drive down there every single day and you get out of your truck, no matter what kind of mood you're in, it's one of those rare places that you get in a better mood to go to work. So, you know, for us, obviously, to leave was not an easy decision. I still struggle with it. I mean...
He's much more sentimental than I am.
You know, like, you know, going to the barrel roll competition and being around, you know, we had 270 employees at Makers, and I was our plant manager and our master distiller, and that's hard because, you know, what we're setting out to do, it has that in mind, but it's probably a generation or so removed from being, you know, what Makers has. But, you know, at the same time, you know, we feel it's an opportunity to go replicate that. And, you know, what better way to honor Rob and Makers and the Beam Suntory family than to go do something like
To
that.
do something new. So I know you can't share too many details, but talk about the entrepreneurial part of this. I mean, it's gutsy to step out on your own. I mean, after working for a very secure corporation, let's put it that way. I mean, you're going to do your own thing.
It's called golden handcuffs, Steve.
Golden.
And yes, it's very difficult. Trust me. We're unemployed.
No, you're employed if you just do what I say.
So,
I'm teasing.
I do have Rob's number on speed dial.
We,
Saw him last night. I said, Rob, I don't know about this.
We did. We hung out with him last night, but we've been friends for 15. When I started at Makers, I learned the distillery from Denny. He was the distillery manager.
I didn't know y'all crossed over in that previous life of yours.
Yeah, when I started, I was our global brand ambassador, and my first job was to go learn the operations so Denny was the distillery manager at the time under Dave Pickerel.
Yeah, worked for Dave Pickerel.
And so I spent 2 weeks learning the distillery under Denny, and we were fast friends and stayed in touch, and now we're neighbors and been
Full-on Bardstownians, aren't you?
yeah.
Yeah. I've been in Bardstown for 20 years. So, yeah.
You've moved
Lived
here, moved back,
a mile
moved
and a half
here.
away.
I'm on my second stint in Bardstown, 2 years. We love it. My husband and I love it here.
So again, just a little bit about what you're going to be doing. I guess you have partners in this.
We're the majority shareholders.
Wow.
It's good. I mean, we never would have done this if we were, let's say, at 49%, because we had the greatest jobs in the world. And it's just something that, it's probably a conversation that started years ago, but
We've
got a
been
little
playing-
more. Yeah, I mean,
We've been playing distillery fantasy camp for a lot of years.
yeah.
Oh, so tell us about that conversation. What does Distillery Fantasy Camp look
we're
like?
always like, if we were to go start a distillery, what would we make? And then we do draft picks, like
Yeah, who we'd hire.
who would we
Who
hire?
you'd coach?
I told her I'm starting with an HR manager
We flipped a
and
coin.
a maintenance
I'm
manager.
HR. We flipped a coin. I'm HR.
Is that
Yeah, no,
Hellraiser
not
or
only is
Human
she HR,
Resources?
she has actually said that the 1-800 hotline number where you can phone in anonymously harassment or hostile work environment is her cell phone.
Is that?
But I'm going to call Alex, her husband, who's a good friend of mine, and I'm going to turn all those complaints over to Alex because I know he feels it.
So you're more Hellraiser than HR, I guess, than Human Resources. Is
I
that
just
right?
feel like guidelines instead of rules. It's fine.
Yeah, no policy needed.
We've talked about it. I think everybody that loves this industry, it's such a great industry, and it's such good people, and I think everyone dreams about, if I were going to make my own, what would it be, and what would we do, and how would we do it, and who would you do it with,
And I think, what I've done my entire career, what I've been allowed to do and been lucky to do, is work with all these families that are in their legacy, right? So,
Right.
whether, my first day on the job at Jim Beam in 1998, Fred walked me into the plant. I didn't even know who he was until I got to the lab, and they were like, how did Fred end up walking you in? I'm like, I just saw him in the parking lot. He knew I had no idea where I was going and walked me in. And then the first week was able to take distillate samples to Booker. Of course, Fred and Freddie
Just
live right down the
there.
road here.
Yeah.
we can give you
So
their
that's where
address if you want to go visit.
Booker
them.
lived, and so got to meet Booker, and then so you get that legacy, and then pop over to Maker's Mark, and you got the Samuels. Go down to Crucian Rum, you got the Nelthrops, which they're 85 years making rum on island down there. Go to Heaven Hill, work with the Shapiros, and then Parker and Craig Beam, and then back to Makers. It's we've told these stories, and they're great stories, and they're real, and they're true, and the passion behind it is because it's legacy. And I think it was just, the more we talked about it, it was, wow, we have an incredible opportunity that maybe we won't reap a lot of that, whether it was Jim Beam or whoever, the five
Right.
brothers from Heaven Hill.
Right.
But at the same time, if you can lay the foundation for
Your kids.
generational operations,
Or even just employees.
generational, the one thing about our industry, and I said it was the mantra at Maker's Mark, the reason why we're able to do this and have this festival is because of the employees. I mean, it's an incredible workforce. We're in an industry that has good margins, and you're just able to have generational employment.
Right.
At Makers, we had 3 generations of family that would work at Maker's Mark. So the idea to be able to do that and provide the jobs, the security, because as we've seen the last 2 or 3 years, it has not been the greatest time to work, but at the same time in our industry, specifically bourbon, we've grown.
Yeah, people drink when times are bad and
It's-
stressful.
And good. Just drink.
Well, even in an environment in 2020 when literally all bars and restaurants are shut down for an entire year globally, and your business grows. But it grows because they go from drinking a 1 liter to a 1.75 liter,
I did that.
right? Which is, we're all bulk buyers.
Anybody do that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're like, how am I spending
It's-
more money and I'm not going out? And it's like, oh, I've developed this habit. Like, you're like, oh, I could buy the more expensive because I'm at home and it's
I'm
saving
not
money.
tipping, yeah.
Yeah.
But that alone creates problems because your glass manufacturers don't plan on that. So that's some of the things you've seen in the supply chain is some disruption with glass supply and things like that. But
That's
no,
interesting.
it's-
Go down that road for a second because I don't think a lot of people in the audience may not. I talk to you people and I hear the woes like we can't get plastic bottle caps, we can't get glass, we can't get all
Yeah.
these weird things that absolutely have to be part of the whiskey making business. What has Maker's Mark suffered in? Glass was a huge thing for Maker's Mark, right?
We were lucky.
Yeah, we were lucky. It's everybody loves distilleries, right? That's why we're here, right? We've got replica stills, we've got
Oh my
distillate,
God,
we've
I
got
feel like
aged.
a wastewater
but
treatment lecture's coming.
I was a Class 3 certified wastewater operator
yes,
for
we know
You
you
do
love
whatever you can to
wastewater.
climb that ladder, Jane. I know you don't know that,
Master distiller / I make cattle feed for a living.
but I was a turd herder for 7 years. I'm not ashamed to say that.
A turd herder.
But it is the packaging side. Everybody likes the package, but, bottling is a bigger part of an operation than distilling.
And it's a much more stressful part.
It's very stressful. And so,
Because labels don't go on, the line gets jammed
all
up.
of that.
Food grade, and then you talk about export. Everybody's market's got a different need.
but, at Makers, we were lucky because, we've had the whole industry is built on relationships. So you leverage those when you need to leverage them. Either way.
You just treat people well, and they'll treat you well.
And so, maybe you've got to adapt a little bit. Maybe you can't get all the 175 glass you need, but, maybe you do some more 1 liters because that business has died, but you put that out in market. Everybody's willing to help, and when you have those relationships already established, it goes a long, long way. It's a big part of the reason why we, feel like we can step out and do this is because we've been building relationships for, combined 40 years, and that helps.
And you've probably seen most of what can go wrong and how to fix it.
Yeah.
I would think.
Yeah, operationally,
Knock on laminate. Is that a new
knock
saying?
on laminate.
Yeah, I think operationally it's, making whiskey is not rocket science, but you got to be damn patient, and that's what gets a lot of people. Like you have to have cash flow, you have to have patience.
Your inventory's evaporating.
But it's all, it's it's pumps, it's valves, it's motors, it's heat exchangers.
You're really selling.
It's-
This is a super sexy
You're
conversation.
rolling the sex
Pumps
appeal
and
out. Yeah.
Okay, well,
Pipes and turds.
I know it's not what you want to think about or worry about. All you're thinking about are
All right, so
the shit
pretty-
we can set on fire, the fireworks going off, the smoke bomb, the smoke machine as you walk out
Sell
on
the
stage.
sex appeal then, Jane.
I'm thinking
It's on
warehouse
you.
design. I'm thinking maturation. I'm thinking blending. I'm thinking about yeast and how long we ferment and what it's going to taste like. And I think about the liquid.
Which involves tanks, pipes, valves, heat exchangers.
I let you worry about the logistics. No, it's why we make a good team. Is our skill sets are very different.
Extremely.
And we know how to argue and
Extremely.
work through it,
Yeah.
usually.
And you said, that even though you're unemployed, you've been working on what you're.
We're on
you're-
day 9. This is day
You're on,
9.
you're on day 9, and that I think Alex said it was stressful, right? He's gonna be your counselor. You all need counseling already.
Well,
Oh,
Beth,
yes.
Beth was our counselor.
And I always know Alex will side with me, so that feels pretty good.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're my husband's best friend. That's
Yeah.
annoying. Yes.
So, well, again, without revealing details, what do you envision in your new project? Because you're coming from a company that uses one recipe, manipulated or changed many, many different ways just through barreling and aging and all these cool things that you've done. What do you want to do now? I mean, that's really stepping from a rigorous regime of activity to something a little bit more wide open.
It is, and I think it'll take a while to unlearn some of those disciplines that we've spent. I mean, ultimately, we just want to make fantastic juice.
And it will be whiskey.
It will be
Is that right?
whiskey.
No white spirits unless it's white dog.
I've talked him out of vodka. It's fine. And I think we both love the industry. We don't have a ton of hobbies. We're kind of those sad people that this is what we love.
These are sad people.
We're those sad people that it's like, what'd you do on your day off? I went to a brewery.
Turd herding and
yes.
chasing whiskey.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think for us, it's taking those 41 combined years and making whiskey we would want to drink and optimizing flavor at every single touch point.
Yeah, I mean, our approach has been, and we've learned this, as we've gotten into the process of designing and all the others, and that we've come from a process mindset, like all the things that we want to implement and put into our distillery. And it's the craziest thing in the world because we sit in the meetings with obviously the design team and the engineers, and they're like, oh, you guys know what beer density is? Like, you know what this is? We're like, yeah, we've been around a little bit. But then you sit in the meetings with the architects, and they're like, well, what do you want your distillery to look
We're
like?
we
And
don't
we're like,
care.
Maybe
"Shit, I
think
have
about
no
that."
idea. I have no idea
We
what.
don't know.
And they're like, well, everybody starts with what they want their distillery to look like. And then we're like, well, yeah, that's not us. I don't know what to tell. Like, what do you guys
but
think? Like, what do you
we'll
want to
fight
build?
to the death about our grain hopper, but what
Yeah,
color
we're now
aesthetics
in a
really,
debate over do we want milled bins or just scale hoppers for each.
They were laughing. They're like, you two are either fighting to the death or you have no opinion. Like, there's nothing in between.
Yeah.
I remember you guys arguing at that when Private Select we did for it was one of the
Community batch.
community batch.
Oh, yeah.
And you, Jane, saying to you, Denny, you have 3 taste points. Was it cherry,
Vanilla and meh.
and meh?
Denny's a man of few tasting words.
But the cool part of that was we dug into that, and you said, I said, can you tell when each other is off? And she said, absolutely. Just because of that, we know exactly what he tastes.
Yeah.
And or you know if you're not hitting your normal remarks, your more florid remarks about what you're tasting.
Steve, I'm not that simple.
I'm sure you're not.
It's like 7 or 8 adjectives.
It's not. It's really not.
But I mean, she makes stuff up. Like,
I have 12 tasting notebooks
if
on the
a
go.
blow pop had a baby with popcorn,
And you know
this
exactly
is what it
what
would
that
taste
tastes
like.
It's like salty and sweet and a little bit sticky. Got
Ridiculous.
some texture. No, people know
As
what that
Jimmy Russell once told me when he was listening to somebody describe wild turkey up on stage, we were at, it was one of the Whiskey Fest years ago, and the guy's throwing out all these adjectives, much like what you do, and Jimmy just leaned over and said, I don't know about you, but none of that shit went in my mash tub. And I was like, I'm going to run with
All right,
that.
Jimmy, let's talk about lignin degradation then.
what?
No, here's the thing. I agree with you, and it's annoying because he's a really good taster. But we laugh. I have a tasting notebook for every project and everything. He's had the same tasting notebook for 4 years, and it's maybe 20% full.
No,
That's,
I mean, I'm not. That notebook is not for you. It's for me. It's not. We're not writing a memoir out of that. Like, it's literally. I can open it up, know exactly what I felt, what I tasted. a year ago, 2 years ago.
If you were
It's like
playing-
going in your office, right? You've got stacks and stacks of paper and files and BS, and nobody's taking your
I
trash
don't
out
like,
in 2 years.
He's our
But by God, you know where
he's
everything
our digital
is.
department. I don't do digital.
Whatever. We are not going to make it, Steve.
It's not going to make
we
it,
are
are
not going to make it. I need to move back to St. Croix.
you? Sharpen your rum chops.
Yeah. I got plenty of friends still down there. Maybe going on a boat with somebody.
It's gonna be great. We're gonna fail.
Any-
we'll
any-
fail spectacularly at the very
yeah.
least.
Any timeline? 2025, maybe?
We hope 2 years.
Yeah, it should be operational in 2 years.
And
So-
even though we can't give a location, it is in Kentucky.
Yes.
Yes.
right? And a shocker, as Denny said, the state's being a little weird about how's it going to work.
They want everything to be secretive. It's almost like they want to be a part of everything, so they've got to get their ducks in a row. But we're hopeful to
Patting themselves on the back. with
to
that.
put an official announcement out in the next month or so. We'll see. I don't know.
And all the media.
I can't. Just don't ask. Like I'm this close to telling you
He's
right now.
incapable of not telling the truth.
can't be
or,
vague.
Or saying like mind your own business. Like I don't know why that's so hard.
That's
to
why
say.
you're HR and PR, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Oh, it's a disaster.
Yeah, we're fucked.
Does anybody have any questions for these two?
Easy.
Anybody want to ask a question?
Easy.
Come on. You,
Oh, you have
so
a
the
great
question,
story about that.
the question is, how do you maintain just like the quality of the yeast or the taste of the yeast?
And the consistency so it doesn't mutate. Yeah. Tell what happened recently, which was so interesting, that they had the mother strain tested.
Oh, yeah.
That was fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, we could do a whole seminar. If you've ever listened to Pat Heist with Wilderness Trail, those guys are absolutely phenomenal. I mean, with yeast, it's like any bacteria, right? You got to control temperature, pH, for the most part. So if you're propagating your yeast every day, like liquid yeast, you've got to have a cooler. You got to keep it at a low temperature. And then everything that you do, you spend more time disinfecting equipment than you do actually propagating. So it's making sure you don't have any bacterial contamination. So you've got that side of it. And not a lot of people still propagate yeast on site. What people have gone to anymore is like working with, whether it's Pat and Shane, because they have a yeast company, like they can actually propagate your yeast on site or on their site, dehydrate it, ship it to you as a solid. You just rehydrate it and then pitch it. That's actually a much easier way to control your yeast strain. So you've got that. And you see that a lot with newer distilleries. And then on the flip side of it, if you're these generational distilleries that have been propagating your own yeast, you need to make sure that you haven't had mutation. So recently, we've always, whether I was at Heaven Hill or even at Makers, we always kept our yeast strain freeze-dried off-site, so cryogenically stored. And we did that when I was at Makers the first time. So I started at Makers the first time in 2003. We actually had a sample that we cryogenically stored that was from like 20 years before that. We recently did a DNA analysis on it to make sure that it was the same strain, and it was 99.9%
Wow.
the same.
Which is amazing.
Which is, I was worried. Like, I was like, well, okay, this will be good to know, but if it's different, what do you do?
And what deviation is tolerable?
That's a great question. I mean, I think at that point, if it's obviously moved and mutated, when did it mutate? And when did it mutate? Is that the liquid you're tasting
and then how's
today?
it operating
Oh, wow.
differently,
So-
whether it's set temperature or time, because different yeast thrive in different environments. So I think it was super interesting.
And what we would have done in that instance, Steve, is you keep enough store. I mean, you don't need much to restart the strain, right? So that
Right.
sample that was cryogenically stored, it's like working in a microbiology lab in high school, right? Where you would swab the inside of your mouth and put it on the Petri dish, and then you would actually pull a little bit off that and then replate it. That's what we probably would have repropagated off of that strain that was
20-year-old?
cryogenically stored, and then compared the two, right? Like just made whiskey with both of them and tasted the distillate and made a decision. But lucky enough, we didn't have to do that, but that was going to be the game
I mean,
plan.
it's a big one because the yeast is really responsible for
Yeah.
all your flavor in the distillery. I mean, and then we argue a lot about bacteria.
Yeah, I mean, it can be good, but it can
I like
also,
the funk. Bacteria brings the funk.
you also don't care about yield. which
I
is-
don't care about yield.
Somebody's got to care about
I
the
don't
money
care about yield.
side of it.
Wow, day 9.
What?
Yeah.
Day 9.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we'll see.
How big do you expect the company to be? Is it going to be like most of just ramp up and grow, or are you just jumping in with a giant effort?
We're not going to be.
Can't answer that.
We're not going to be teeny tiny.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I mean,
It's a hard way to grow in this industry.
At the end of the day, exactly. I mean, and a lot of people that are here today will tell you that the easiest part is making it. The tough part is selling it and distributing it. That's where it gets to be difficult. So, that's really where Jane's expertise comes into play as well, because she's launched so many brands, and we have those relationships that, to think that the first year that we have, liquid available to sell, that we're going to do 200,000 cases.
Not happening.
That's not real.
That's
but
not
to
realistic.
have a plan to ramp up to that, of course. But that's all about distribution.
I was talking to David Mandel a couple of weeks ago about them growing Bardstown Bourbon Company, and the story is actually, the interview was actually for Rabbit Hole, about how they've grown and how they had to attract Pernod's investment to grow.
Yeah.
And he said that number starts, you can get to 70,000 to 100,000 cases with a sizable distillery, but he said doubling that takes huge investment.
Yeah.
Huge market penetration elsewhere.
It's so one of the things we did together actually for Makers was we managed the inventory and 12-year forecasting. And it's one of the things when people come into the industry from other places, whether it's craft or you get, people from other food and beverage, they don't understand whiskey forecasting, right? Because you're having to think, we plan in decades and centuries. Like we had projects that we wouldn't live long enough to see.
Right.
So it's a very different mentality when you're forecasting 10 and 20 years out, but you have to make that whiskey today to be thinking about that. So when you guys are out there and you're like, it's real because 20 years ago they didn't know they needed to make more, or they couldn't make more, or the inventory got used for something else. Like we love it, but it's fascinating. But trying to explain to someone that doesn't live it, it's hard for them to understand.
That leads me to a great last question. You've been in 25, you said?
25,
You've been in
yeah.
16?
16.
Did you ever think you'd be sitting here doing this, seeing this, when you were wandering around aimlessly at the Beam parking lot? I mean, is this just like beyond your imagination?
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, it's, when I started at Beam in 98, we had the Outpost. That was it. Like, you went and watched a video of Booker and Fred, and if you knew Booker and Fred, you're like, why am I watching this video? This is ridiculous. And, Bourbon Festival, obviously.
That was a tourism experience,
that
right?
was it, yeah. And then, but from a Bourbon Festival standpoint, I mean, it's nothing like what it is today. I remember when I got to go to the gala for the first time, like in 1999, and I was just blown away. Like, I couldn't believe, even back then, the interest. And today, it's why we're in the greatest industry in the world. I never thought that I wanted to be a marine biologist. That's what I wanted to do.
Okay, but guys, he wanted to be a marine biologist, and he went to school at Indiana University. It's landlocked. What were you gonna do?
I've told you this story a million times. I lived in Indiana. I could only afford to go to a state school. I was going to get my master's after I got my 4.0 in my undergrad.
But you got a 2.1.
I had a 1.7 one semester. It didn't work out.
And you said, I'm not smart enough to deal with plankton. I'll go make whiskey.
Hey, but look at you. Your mother tried to set you up with a job, and you deliberately dragged your heels on even applying for it.
I did. My mom is every day is like, you're welcome. I woke up with a Post-it. I woke up with an advertisement taped to my forehead.
She literally taped it to your
She
forehead?
put it basically on my face and said, "Go get a job." And I was like, I don't want this job, but to appease my mom, I'll write a letter and I'll drop off my resume a week late to Maker's Mark, and then Rob Samuels called. So
And I think, Steve, I think it's changed a little bit, but
that would not
you know,
happen.
15, 20 years ago, you just kind of lucked into it. It was a job. I mean, I went from a lab to a lab. That's the only reason why I got in the industry, because I was a chemist for Safety Clean and was tired of working 12-hour nights and weekends. And Jim Beam had an opening for a Monday through Friday day shift. I took a pay cut to get in the industry, but it was really more about I just wanted to have a normal life outside of work.
You just didn't have a hankering to make bourbon, huh?
Yeah, I mean, my family has a little bit of ties in the bourbon industry, but it wasn't anything that was like, oh, you got to go do this. It
Yeah.
was,
I grew up in
you
a
just
dry
kind of fall
town.
in.
So
Back
it
then, you
was-
fell into it.
Yeah.
But you realized right away what you fell into and how incredible it was, even back then. And then today, it's just so much.
It's amazing.
So much better than it was in '98.
And the only thing I would add before I know we were at time, looking
That
around,
never stopped you from talking.
look,
though.
looking around at this, I think what it speaks to though, and what I love is the camaraderie of this industry.
Absolutely.
It's the only industry, and I don't even see this in other. You see it a little bit, like if you're a Scotch drinker and you go to Isla, like the Isla distilleries are close, but you don't get the same community in other industries. And I think what's been so smart about the bourbon industry, all the families are friends, and they decided a long time ago, let's work together. Bill Samuels always says, it's still pie making time, it's not pie dividing time. So I think that's why it's finally, bourbon's having a moment, nothing's gotten in the way, and the industry works so well together.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've seen that in the last 9 days. Everyone has reached out and said, if you need help, like who does that, right?
Yeah, how cool.
Yeah.
How cool.
So it's an amazing industry.
Well, thanks so much for all the time you guys have shared with me, helping me with my job, and definitely stepping up here to talk about what you've got going next. Thanks, as always, coming to the Bourbon Festival. Thanks for sitting and listening to them. They're a hoot. They're like this all the time.
Actually,
wait.
we've been toned down today.
Can't
Yeah.
wait to see what you're going to do.
Thanks,
Soon,
Steve.
though. It'll be soon.
And if you guys want to know anything about ham, this is the guy to talk to.
Baby.
Because
I
you
should
left
have
that
brought
out
you
of-
some.
You left that out of your bio. He, literally the best ham I ever eat is always with.
I just buy it at Broadbent's
Yeah.
and Newsom's. I just cut it for
Well,
her.
you cut it and you age it. It's delicious.
Oh, thank you so much.
All
You're
right.
too kind. Thanks, everybody.
Yep.
Bye.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks. Great Western malting as well.